All right. So, quick chat about art. Where it went, what's going on with it, and what's probably being lost. Um, so, my whole spiel about free expression and caring about the maintenance of psychological freedom and understanding what restricted speech does to thought. And there is a relationship. You start restricting what people say, inevitably, to say it's wrong, to think it's wrong, you create anxiety, you create self-repression, which is kind of how all that's designed to begin with. But I think given the internet and given the whole SJW war and all of this nightmare that we've lived through and live with now, I think it's too far gone. And I've been listening back, as a writer, as a quasi-musician, artistic person all around traditionally and historically, this was really kind of what I was screaming about. And as somebody who, as a writer, had her personal journals taken, read, spread about online, at the best of times, writers tend to be an anxious and neurotic bunch. And so I was listening to David Foster Wallace speak, and just listening about how he was constantly analyzing questions he was getting and making very sure that he presented himself and said things carefully, because he didn't want to be misinterpreted, and he didn't want to feel like he'd been quoted inaccurately, and how important that was to him back then in 2000, 2004. Imagine it today, when being misquoted or having something you say be misinterpreted can cost you everything. And I speak as someone who knows that for a fact in her own life. So, I'm super careful. I mean, it's been recently. It's since I've been in Canada this last time. I know for a fact I've had my journals read and gone through, taken straight out of my luggage. And people who do this kind of stuff, they don't care about artistic creativity. They don't care about the integrity of the mind that creates, because they're not creating anything themselves. They're just destroying. They're just out here to make themselves feel better by breaking something else down and bringing it down to their level. So, it's dark times for creative folks out here, and it has been for a long time. And we tend to be more sensitive souls anyway. So if you've got people out here on the front lines, like journalists and reporters and writers and political speakers and thinkers, on the front lines of the culture wars, the people I've tried to support, people like Tucker Carlson, I supported them for quite selfish reasons, and the fact that I knew as an artist that was the front line. And if these people if these frontline workers in the war against thought and speech repression and repression of creativity, and if those people fell to the deplatforming crew and the shut them down crew and the, what is it someone said to me? Oh, yes, radical justice, where attempting to sex traffic someone is seen as some kind of form of justice for their opinions about whatever. Giving into that, losing the people who were fighting that battle, I knew long ago that really I had no interest in creating anything and putting it out into the public sphere anymore. Working with DJing, working with, coming from the rave background, electronic music, a lot of those people work very hard to say very little on social media and let their music do the talking, because they don't want to have people come and hear them spin a set or play a festival or a club and have some kind of negative emotional association, because that's the whole opposite thing of what rave and club culture is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun and happy and everybody likes each other and gets along, and you can't have that kind of a vibe, that kind of a almost ex-hippie vibe, in a culture that has taken everyone and said, okay, divide and conquer, and turned everyone into some ideologue, zealot, nutter, from either the camp left or right. You can't have peaceful, happy, open-minded people who decide that um, you have to see it my way or the highway. That's not real tolerance. So long tolerance being real dead, of course, the first thing to go with that is an internal understanding of personal freedom and limitless expression, because subconsciously, whether you've thought about it or not, that there are consequences. There are consequences for writing the wrong thing. There are consequences for thinking the wrong thing, expressing the wrong thing, playing the wrong thing, perhaps. There are consequences now. And they're quite immediate, and people who would gladly bring those consequences to you have access to you via social media, where they can be shown things you've written, shown things you've drawn, shown things you've played, painted, whatever. And anybody who has any problems with anything you've expressed now has complete carte blanche and free license to gang up with other like-minded assholes and find you. And if you don't think this is a reality for writers, journalists, etc., take a look at Andy Ngo, sure I'm massacring his name, who covered an SJW rally, an Antifa rally, and ended up in the hospital with possibly permanent brain trauma. So, and these people, they're not backing down. Trust me. I am living in probably one of the continental epicenters in North America right now, and I can assure you it does not let go, so to speak. You know, some people are playing for keeps, and they don't care if they're right or wrong. They care that they win. And so, I really wanted to do some writing more than anything. I think that's probably going to end up being my focus. I've always been a writer. I wanted to focus more on other forms of art, things that were more fun for me. Yay, making music and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, there's always been something kind of at the back of my head going, there's a price to pay for this. And for this shutting down and feeling good and not paying attention to serious stuff and not wanting to take on real issues and not wanting to look at the darker side of things and always trying to be positive, well, that's just not reality. So I think that's best covered for me personally, at least right now, for where I am in writing. And it scares me that I'm scared. I'm scared to accurately write and reflect the things I see around me. I am scared to express myself creatively, artistically, in the written word. And I don't think if you had someone come along with a level of intelligence and sensitivity and, I would say, neuroticism, if you had someone like that, in the form of genius of David Foster Wallace come along today, I don't think you'd get an infinite jest out of them. I think you'd get somebody who was very careful what presence they allowed themselves online and basically called it a day. Because the smartest people I've met since I started going through all of this, the smartest people I've known are very, very careful about their online presence if they have one at all. One of my favorite teachers in high school I went back and talked to a few years back, and she informed me that she has not so much as an email account and refuses to have one. So, yeah, I think we've pretty much destroyed the intellectual free space in at least Western society. I know that, I can be somewhere over in Asia, and as long as I'm not talking about politics there, if I'm talking about politics or anything anywhere else, I have no problems. And so I have to say, I think that's one of the better options is, if you're going to cover things, politically, socially, culturally, discuss these issues, don't be in a place where you're discussing them. Go get an experience of whatever it is and then leave and then write about it. Because the backlash you can experience and the price you can be made to pay is just too high. Just too high. And so, I hate to say it, but the only people that are exempt from this are the people that have the highest status of victimhood because they can say anything, and people are either scared to the point of shutting up, they just don't want the problem, or the other half supports them. And you only have to look at the decline in mainstream culture in the United States to see how true that is, and to understand that there's a reason you can go from Janis Joplin to Cardi B in a couple of generations, and nobody really says anything. And I don't know Cardi B as a person. She could be wonderful and lovely and whatever, but I am saying that to hold her up as a cultural ideal, to have her be the number one most listened to artist for any age group, doesn't speak very highly of the cultural integrity or the quality of culture from which she's coming. And I mean that on a whole, as the whole nation. I'm not talking about any particular socioeconomic group in there, but if that's your best, if this is, the highest quality art, the most widely received art, the most widely viewed, listened to, whatever that you're putting out there, man, oh man, have standards fallen. And I think they're beyond irretrievable at this point. And I think, like I said, it takes one generation, and you're a couple of generations deep, at least in this now in the US. And I think it's pretty much game over because you can't stand up to any of this. And I mean, it never occurred to me, like, when I was critiquing certain musicians or producers or quote unquote artists or whatever, it never really occurred to me that, like, some of these people might actually think they're making good music. I mean, I know that there are a lot of them that are just buying songs and making whatever formulaic crap will sell the most records. That's generally what you've got in the mainstream, which is how they sell the most records and get to the top. But I think some of these people actually want to believe that they're making something worthwhile, that they're making good music, that they're, because they sell so much that it must be great stuff. I think they start believing their own press junkets or something. But anyway, all that aside, I'm really not trying to be controversial here. I'm just using that as an example of cultural decline and fear of speaking, and the repression that a lot of us who genuinely just want to create and aren't looking to get rich feel and are held back by. I mean, every time I write in my journal now, I have to write with the understanding that there's a good chance someone's going to take it, find it, read it, disseminate it, try to use it against me in some way, form, or fashion. And the most recent episode of this was not even so much as 4 months ago. While I was out, someone went through my journal and then started thinking she was clever by having conversations with me randomly out of the middle of nowhere that were related to things written in my journals. Talking about my travels and randomly bringing up Prague, of all things. All places, rather. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that other than, this is just... I'm making this for other creative minds out there and other creative people and other artistic people who feel very scared and no longer wake up seeing every day and every sheet of paper or every canvas as in fact being blank and without borders and unrestricted. We understand very well that there are consequences and potential consequences that go far beyond anything one would have imagined not even 20 years ago. So, huge shout out to David Foster Wallace. And, when I think of two people that I wish were still around who decided to take their own lives and rid themselves of this nightmarish mortal coil, sometimes nightmarish at least. David Foster Wallace and Kurt Cobain are my two that I wish were still here. So anyway, that's my spiel, and maybe I'm gonna go write, or maybe I'm just gonna sit here and contemplate how unfree I feel to write. Good times.